So, guys, I just went to the Cinemark Theater and I watched The Crow, and definitely it's a film that means a lot to me. And I definitely just want to give it a review. And this may actually be a video series, depending on how long and how much I have to say about The Crow. And for those who don't know, that The Crow was a controversial film because Bruce Lee's son Brandon Lee acted in the film, and he actually died because he was like they were shooting like a prop gun, and I believe part of it went into his body. I'm not sure the actual story. I'm not sure the exact details, but that's just a bit of a summary of it. But it's definitely a film that it really hits on a lot of different emotions, and it's one of the most like underrated films of all time, and it's one of the greatest films of all time in my opinion. And the film is based on a graphic novel, and it's about this person who, Eric Draven and his girlfriend Shelley Webster, and they were going to get married on Halloween, but the night before is Devil's Night. And what happens during Devil's Night is when a criminal organization run by this guy named Top Dollar decide to cause mayhem, and usually the thing they do is just do a bunch of arsons. So what happens is that I believe the story is that she didn't want to move out of her area. She got an eviction notice, and I think it was told that they need to scare her or whatever. So these criminals come in and they decided to kill her, rape her. Eric walks in, they shoot him a bunch of times, throw him off a building. They both die, and then he comes back as a ghost. And it's believed that the crow is the messenger that delivers you to death. The same way there's a boat rower in the story of there's a boat rower in Greek mythology that takes you across the river Styx to the world of the dead, or in Dante's Inferno, like how Dante had Virgil. So that just that guide to the guy that delivers you to death almost. So what happens is that he's allowed to be resurrected and set things right, and he goes on a killing spree to get rid of all these criminals. And at the very end, he doesn't want actually anything to do with like Top Dollar, who's in charge of all these people, if I remember saying his name correctly. And he decides to kidnap this girl that Sarah, that Sally, that Eric. There's this girl Sarah that's kind of like been that's kind that has a parent named Donna, who is involved in drugs and having sex with men. So she kind of looks at Eric and Shelley as like parent figures, but she gets kidnapped and by these other criminals, and they figured out that that if you kill the crow, you take away this guy's immortality, really. And what happens is that he's able to save her at the end, and after all that happens, he's able to pass on, and that be that, really. So there's a couple of things I need to say about the film. That's a summary of the whole thing, but there's a couple of things I need to say. That I think the cinematography is amazing. The art production, one of the worst, one of the biggest criminal injustices in filmmaking is that this was not nominated for an Oscar for set production. It should have been nominated for set production. The next thing that I would say is that it really falls into the Blade Runner category, where Blade Runner was not nominated for any Oscars in the 80s. And then also, when you look at The Crow, was not nominated for any Oscars, but it should have been nominated for like best cinematography or best art production. But art production, absolutely. The next thing that I would say is that some of the cinematography is bad in the film because there's a lot of scenes where there's a lot of violence and action, so the camera's kind of jerking around, or the editing jumps a little too much, so you know what's going on, really. But in action sequences, there's 10 or 12 things happening in a fight, and you may not like kind of follow it that much because it's a little hard to follow when the camera's really jerky, or the editing's really jerky, or there's cutaways. They do a lot of intercutting in this film where, you may see a fight scene, you may see somebody get thrown out a window, you may have that fight scene continue, then you see the person like get land on a bunch of people. So there's a bunch of intercutting. It is a little bit like it's probably like a fast motion Sam Peckinpah film. So that's a little bothersome. The other thing that I would say is that it is a very bad script. You know, I think the lines, there's some philosophy in some like what the characters are saying, but they're not really that dimensional. I think that Eric Draven's character, he says a lot of jokes really, so there's a sense of dark comedy when you watch it, and some of the lines are very corny and the characters are very one-dimensional. So I do think that, like I've said, I think that the script is not that good. They're not deep and meaningful characters. It is a revenge film. It's not it's not like deep and meaningful and multi-layered like Kill Bill. It's just more of a 1970s slasher where it's a rape and revenge film basically. So the characters are not that dimensional, and that really hurts the film. But I think because the music, the editing, the cinematography, the acting, and the directing really just puts you in that world so well, you really overlook it. Because honestly, a story about a person being shot a couple of times, coming back as a ghost and killing a couple of people. I even told my father that about what The Crow was about. Like almost 10 years ago when I watched it with my brother at home. But it's almost like this is like the best version of a story of a kind of like a fantasy revenge film. This is probably the best way it's been done. You watch it and then you're kind of like so immersed in it because it's so well made, and it kind of can tell you that anybody could have any idea, and it could be ludicrous, or it can be cartoony. But if it's done so well, it can elicit any emotion. It can elicit, sadness. It can elicit seriousness. It can elicit anger. It can elicit comedy. It can elicit, whatever really. It's kind of like what happens in that episode where Kenny dies in South Park. Where one of the it was meant to make you sad, and it was a genius of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, because most people would laugh at it because Kenny dies in every episode. So why are you? So it's amazing that they can make you feel just by visuals. And the same way you watch the movie film The Crow, you take a concept that's a little ludicrous, and then it makes you feel really. I think that is done in such a transcendent way that there is no way in my mind, with all the education that I have, that I can call this a bad film, or I can call this, nothing less than an A+ film. I would say that I've never seen any sequels to The Crow. There were a bunch of sequels, and I think there was a television show, but I remember, but I think like they all just bombed really. But I think that this film represents a bunch of things. I think that this film mostly is a gothic. It's mostly a supernatural horror and a fantasy revenge film. And it's also a comic book film. I also think that this film is also a film that really is about death, because what happens is that Brandon Lee died on the set. So I really think that this film, it serves two purposes. It's meant to be it's meant to give like the cast and crew and everybody who worked on Project closure, losing Brandon Lee on the set tragically. And I also think that this is meant to just be an emotional film really. I think that that's all I have to really say. It's a very, very powerful film. I don't want this video to be too long, because I do think that there needs to be another video talking about the themes of The Crow. And I'm going to do that right now for you guys. But overall, very powerful film, very emotionally driven, one of the most underrated films in cinematic history. And if there's a top 10 of comic book films, or graphic novel based films, this has to go on there. If not, then that's extremely egregious. Very emotionally powerful. Definitely well acted, with a very just bad script with a bunch of corny comedy in it. And I would say the editing is really good. There's some things that I don't like about it. The cinematography is good. There's some things I don't like about it. The directing is very, very strong in this film. The acting is very strong in this film. the musical score and the musical scores and the emotional beats and all that is transcendent. Definitely one of the best films ever made.